right, everybody. Welcome to the GreenCourt Connections podcast. I'm your host, Jay Bland, Chief Growth Officer here at GreenCourt. GreenCourt Connections exists to help connect our listeners on a deeper level with the hardworking folks that work in and interact with government agencies and court systems every single day. We've got a very special guest today. She's one of the most passionate and bold leaders in all of human services that I've met. She's currently the president of INSEA. I've had the pleasure of serving with her on multiple national committees over the past few years, and currently we serve together on the board of directors of INSEA. She might be Michigan's favorite person right now besides Jim Harbaugh, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I do want to welcome Erin Frisch, the 4D director and director of the Michigan Office of Child Support. Erin, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Jay. I'm really excited to spend the next 30 minutes or so with you. And anytime anyone asks you to talk about yourself, it's hard to turn that down. So thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm looking forward to this. You know, Erin, this is a pretty big year for Michigan. We've got RICSA and INSEA Leadership Symposium coming there in your backyard, and I can't wait for those. But besides those two destinations, if someone were to visit Michigan for the first time, what's the first thing they should go see or go do?
Well, it sort of depends on if you are a nature lover or a city lover, or where you want to start, maybe if you're a lover of both. So I really can't say enough great things about the city of Detroit and the transformation that the city of Detroit has gone through over the last decade. It is a vibrant urban community, and I encourage anyone who gets a chance to spend some time in Detroit. I promise you will be definitely pleasantly surprised, and your image of what Detroit is will be changed at the end of that visit. For me, my favorite place to spend time in Michigan is actually in the northwest corner of the state. So as everybody knows, Michigan has 5 Great Lakes surrounding it. Lake Michigan is a lake I grew up on when I was in high school, and is my personal favorite. So if you get a chance to spend time Sleeping Bear Dunes, Traverse City, that corner of the state, it's both beautiful, lots of great hikes. I took a few child support friends mushroom foraging not a couple years ago in the fall, as well as great wineries and great bike trails. So that's probably my favorite place, and where I suggest folks go if they're coming to Michigan.
Yeah, it's got a lot to offer. I mean, I haven't spent a ton of time there, but in 2023 at the Michigan State Conference, we were in that area, right? What was that specific area?
You were in Boyne Mountain.
Boyne Mountain. Yeah, I want to go back when there's snow on the ground, because those ski slopes looked awesome. That was
I do always have to remind folks that, skiing in Michigan is not the same as skiing in Colorado. Well, so what we call a mountain, most people would not call a mountain.
Well, I guarantee you skiing in Michigan and Colorado are better than skiing in Georgia.
Fair enough.
We ski on water here, which is a little bit different. But, it's funny. My wife grew up in the Northeast, and we were talking last week about how, her parents started taking her skiing when she was 3 years old. And our son, Jack, just turned 3. And I cannot imagine putting him on skis and sending him down a mountain. I mean, he was eating out of the dustpan 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. We have actually friends that have a kid like that. Either you put him on skis or put him on ice skates, starting at about 3 in this neck of the woods. Unfortunately, I'm not very good at either.
Well, we all have our skills, and I think, maybe you didn't dream of being an ice skating champion when you were a kid, but what was your dream job?
It's funny because I don't know if I had a dream job. I definitely for a while thought I wanted to be a journalist, an international journalist. I've always loved traveling and what it means to be a global citizen, a citizen of the world, and have always enjoyed words and writing and communication. And so probably for a while I thought maybe I would be a global journalist. Then for a while I thought that I would work as a diplomat. That always intrigued me. When I got to college, I had a professor who really encouraged me to consider, let me back up. I have a degree in economics, political economics. And so he introduced me to the world of the Federal Reserve Bank. And so then I was going to be Alan Greenspan, who was chairman of the Federal Reserve for a while when I was in college. And then I was going to be a librarian, an international documents librarian. I actually did an internship. And so when I left my undergrad program, my thought was that I was going to go to library school and become a librarian.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know that you studied economics. I also studied economics in undergrad, and I was surprised at, for having, I forgot how many students we had at Auburn then. Let's say it's 25,000. There were probably only 50 in that major, which I thought was odd. Where did you study at undergrad again?
I went to Michigan State, the other Michigan school right now, and I actually went to a small residential college within Michigan State called James Madison College. That was a public policy focused school. So I have a double major in international relations and political economics, and a minor in women's studies.
Well, that's considering where you ended up, I'd say there's not really there's some international aspect to what you do, but more localized to your state.
Yes, for sure. And I will say, though, that having a public policy degree has come in very handy in the work that we do here. Most of my classmates went on to become lawyers. There was probably a time in high school where I thought, oh, maybe I'll be a lawyer. And the great irony now is I just work with lawyers all the time, but I never actually became one.
Yeah, it's funny, talking about the question about what was your dream job as a kid. I was very close with my granddad. He passed away over the past couple of years. And, your grandparents would always tell stories about you in front of their friends, even when you're sitting there, like they're really proud of you. And the story he told the most, that I think he was most proud of, I remember where we were. We were sitting in the drive-through trying to get lunch, and I was probably maybe 8 years old. And he asked me, he said, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I looked at him and said, I don't know enough about the world yet to answer that question. And I remember his face, like, how does an 8-year-old say that to that question? I'm looking at a picture of him over my desk now and thinking about that exact question. Neither one of us maybe ended up exactly where our dream job would be, but I would say we're both pretty happy, wouldn't you?
Yes, I say I am very fortunate to have a job that I absolutely love, that I am definitely well suited to. And I consider myself incredibly blessed and lucky and, of course, grateful to have the job that I have. I think I have one of the best jobs that are out there. And being able to say that, I recognize is not something everybody can say. And so I don't take it for granted.
Well said. Well, I mentioned one of my mentors, which leads me into the next question. Who has been the most impactful mentor in your professional life?
I'm not sure I can answer. I'm not good at the most or the best or the single. So I'll talk about a couple of mentors I've had. Before I do that, though, I want to back up for a second, because when you were talking about remembering the stories your grandfather would tell about you, I think there is something really important and connected when our children hear us tell stories about them. And the stories we choose to tell, in your case, mattered a ton, and they matter. And so I'm thinking about you and your little ones, and I've tried to be intentional about the stories that I share about my children. I say my children are my first favorite subject to talk about always. But I'm really clear about what stories I share in front of them, because it's a way to help impart your values and what, because they're listening and they care and they pay attention. So I encourage everyone to think about those stories they're telling about their children in their children's presence, because they can be hugely impactful in terms of how they see themselves in the world. So having said that, a few of my really important, impactful mentors have really come from a variety of different places in my life. I really believe that I can learn something from just about anybody I come across. and that there are always opportunities to exhibit curiosity and wonder and see what comes out of coming at things with that approach. One of my mentors that was influential in getting me into the position I have now is actually the former child support director here in Michigan. Her name is Marilyn Steffen. And the funny thing about Marilyn is her middle daughter, she has 3 girls, and I were in the same 6th grade class. I first interacted with Marilyn when I worked in the private sector as the contractor for Michigan's child support program. A couple of things about Marilyn that really have stuck with me. And one is, even though I was the same age as her daughters, she never, ever, ever treated me as a child. In fact, sometimes I sort of wish she would mother me a little bit. And she really, truly saw me as a peer and a colleague. And for someone who is used to being the youngest person in the room, I was for many years in my career, it was really impactful to me. It was like she never even occurred to her that that is something that should influence how she thinks. The other thing that Marilyn was really good at that I've tried to take with me is building consensus. So Michigan's program is somewhat unique in that we rely on the elected prosecutors in the counties, the front of the court through the state court administrative office, and the circuit courts, and the Office of Child Support in the Department of Health and Human Services to do the work of child support in Michigan. And that requires a lot of teamwork, a lot of collaboration, and a lot of ability to build consensus. And so Marilyn built a really great foundation in that when she was director that I have tried to honor and respect and build from as I have stepped into her shoes. So those were 2 things that I really loved about Marilyn. A more recent mentor for me that I call periodically when I want to bounce ideas off of is someone many child support people know, and that's Scott Cade. Scott was a 4D director, past NCA president, and he's always been very generous and very gracious with his time. One of the things I love about Scott is he tells it how it is. When I need a little sanity check, reality check, Scott is usually who I call for that.
He's your real talk ambassador. That's what we say in our offices. Sometimes you need some real talk.
Yeah.
Probably get that from Scott.
Yep.
This you talk about your program a little bit, and the more I've learned about the Michigan program, the more I realize that whoever leads your agency needs to be a special kind of leader. I mean, it's not structured in a way where you can say, you do this, you do that because I said so and I have the authority. There's more collaboration needed across many different agencies. What would you say have been the characteristics that you've had to display in order to successfully run that program?
I think the first that comes to mind is investing in relationships, investing in people, taking the time to get to know my partners well. I'm fortunate that I've been doing this job for over 10 years now, and it builds a certain amount of trust when you have relationship that you can fall back on. And so I think that's been really important. I think there's a certain amount of openness and curiosity and wonder. So it is not all sunshine and roses in this program. There have been many times when, a friend of the court or a prosecutor has taken me to task for something that they didn't agree with. And I welcome that. I look at those as gifts. I always look at people who are willing to share their opinions with me as a gift, even if I don't agree with it, even if I don't appreciate the way they said it. I think remaining open to that is where we find common ground and ability to move forward. So there's not much about this job, even though I love it and it is the best job I've ever had. I don't take it personally. a decision I make at work is not that you disagree with. I have come to learn doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. Early on in my career, that was a struggle for me. I call myself a people pleaser in recovery, and I don't take the word recovery lightly. Not everybody knows this about me, but I am a survivor of childhood sexual assault. And because of that, I tend to live in a hyper vigilant mode where safety is really always an underlying concern. And from that, and because of my own personality, really wanting to fit in, to blend in, for people to like me, was really important to me for a really long time. And I still fall back in some of those traps sometimes. But I think my biggest growth as a leader was really when I was able to acknowledge and separate, not everybody's going to like me, and I don't need everybody to like me to be good at what I do, and to take this program in the direction I think it should go. But I have a lot of compassion for other human beings, and I think the most vital thing we all can do is figure out how to connect with people as actual human beings, because there's so much in life that disconnects us from our humanity.
That's well said. I mean, I know you said you've moved from a position of someone who wanted everybody to like you to now someone who's maybe more confident in who they are and doesn't need everybody's approval. But I will say that you don't act like someone. You know, there's those people out there that say, I don't care what people think, and they act that way, and really they care a lot about what people think. You don't put off that vibe at all. I must say that the version of yourself that I know is very likable, even if you're not trying.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I think that comes partly because I'm able to separate who I am, who I am as a person, and stand in the power that I know I have inherently, rather than looking for it other places. I think the folks that tend to not have that confidence is because they're externally looking for that validation. And that's been, like I said, a hard lesson for me to learn over the years, but it allows me to be more generous with my own spirit and my own time, which I think helps a lot.
Yeah. And one thing that I have really enjoyed about you, and something I think that, man, if we can leave an impact on the next generations, is I would love for people to learn how to disagree in a more respectful way. You know, I've seen our country, over the past few years get to this point where different means bad, right? Different means wrong. And that bothers me. I know it bothers you. One thing that I've seen with you, though, is your ability to disagree with someone and still be their friend, still be respectful towards them. Is that something you do intentionally, or does it come naturally?
I think it comes with practice, and comes with an intentionality. So I might not think about it every time I do it these days, but I certainly am thinking about it. And truthfully, I was on the phone in the car. My daughter, who's 16, was in the car with me, and I was talking to a colleague, a child support colleague. And I hung up the phone, and my daughter said, "Mom, is that your frenemy so-and-so?" I was like, yes, I think that might be a good way to characterize that relationship. So clearly I talk about work too much at home. But I think it's important to acknowledge that people can still frustrate you. People can still hurt you. And they can also be kind and generous and supportive and collaborative. People are complex. They're not all one thing or another. And so I think that's important for us to remember when we are disagreeing with people. I have colleagues in this program that I like to say they're my favorite people to disagree with, because they are such good friends.
Right. Yeah, that's well said. We've touched on the fact that you've been in your current position for a little over 10 years now. What changes would you like to see in the program as a whole over the next 10 years?
I think they're the things that we have been talking about, but I might take it a step further, and I feel like I should preface this by saying these are my opinions only. They do not reflect any of the organizations that I participate in leadership with. either voluntarily or those that pay my paycheck. But I sometimes wonder if we have exhausted the extent of our imaginations around what child support could be. And in saying that, there are times where I'm like, you know what, let's start over. Let's just scratch it and think about what would it look like to build a program from the bottom up that is focused on empowering, enabling, and supporting parents to be the best parents they can be without any thought to cost recovery or without a focus on the financial aspects of the program. So sometimes I invite folks to participate in a thought experiment with me where say, what if this was the parent support program and not the child support program? What would be different about a program that was framed that way compared to what we have now? So those are the kinds of things I'm thinking about, practically speaking, right? That are continue to be things like not forcing people into our program against their will, just because they don't make enough money. It's things like getting rid of cost recovery. It's things like taking the tools that we have available to us when it comes to enforcing financial orders for support and tailoring those to the particular family situations that we're in. Could look a little different. So our employment programs are a great example of that, but I think we could take that further even than employment programs. Did that answer your question? I hope it did.
Yeah, it did. I mean, I know you have I introduced you as someone who's bold and passionate, and I think that answer specifically shows a little bit of both of those. I mean, you're doing a lot of innovative things there in Michigan, and you're leading a lot of innovative discussions nationally, being the NCIA president. Speaking of some of these policies that, whether we like it or not, this is a policy driven area. What have been some of the unintentional consequences in Michigan of federal modification and enforcement policies?
Well, I sometimes wonder how unintentional they have been. Whether we all were in on it, I'm not sure, but I think some of us might have been in on it. Well, when the ways in which the program has reduced what it means to be a father to what it means to have a paycheck, the ways in which we have pushed away and really, in some cases, vilified fathers is, I think, really unfortunate. And like I said, I don't think all of us were intending for that to happen, but it certainly has happened. I think the story we told ourselves for a long, long time were dads are bad because dads can leave. And dads could leave because they had the economic power to leave. As the world has changed, lots of women now have the economic power to leave also, that they might not have had in 1975 when the program was put into federal law. And so we still have some undoing, some disrupting of that very predominant narrative around the ways we think about fathers and honestly the way fathers think about themselves. And I think we could be a real really at the forefront in helping redefine what it means to be a dad in a way that is more whole, that is more nuanced and complex, just like we are as human beings. And so I think that is something that I think about. In Michigan in particular, we have been a state ever since, almost since the inception of a state 4D program, where we have required cooperation for all public assistance types. So not just TANF or Medicaid, which is in federal law, but also for food assistance and childcare. I think the consequences of doing that has made it very difficult for us to gain any traction in sort of public context around how we're here to help, when there's always hanging over everyone's heads that you're being forced into this program, and the cost recovery component means that we're not actually helping you, we're kind of helping ourselves. So I think that's another area where we haven't done ourselves any favors in terms of actually helping parents, even though we say we're there to help parents.
Well said. I mean, we're Switching gears a little bit, conference season is upon us again. I think November, December, January, a little bit slow. We're not traveling all over the place. You and I see each other in maybe 6 different states every year. But we're in conference season again, and we have Policy Forum coming up in DC. And this will be your first conference as the NCIA president. What are you looking forward to the most? What are you most excited about?
With Policy Forum in particular?
Yeah.
I'm really excited about the diversity of speakers we have, the new voices that we will have an opportunity to hear from at Policy Forum this year, combined with sort of the tried and true folks we trust in the program to help lead the way. So I think there's a really powerful combination between bringing in folks with really new thoughts that maybe are not child support specific, and then thought leaders in our program being able to connect the dots for us all in terms of how those things may apply to us in child support, or what we might be able to learn and leverage from thinkers in other spaces. I'm always pleased when we are consciously thinking about the ways in which equity, inclusion, access, belonging is being contemplated with whatever topic we're talking about. And I think we've done a good job of being pretty intentional about issues of oppression, systemic racism, equity, and inclusion. And I really truly see those as not separate or other or special topics, but really things that are in context of every subject we talk about. We can always look at things through that kind of a frame. And so I'm excited about how that will play out at the Policy Forum as well.
You mentioned DEI. You've done some interesting stuff along those lines inside of your program over the past couple of years. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about those initiatives?
Sure. So in 2017, I think it was, I came to my program leadership folks, my direct reports, which we call our executive management team. And I had been doing my own work and reflection and broadening my own understanding of systems of oppression, racism, sexism, homophobia, right? Whatever ones we want to talk about. And I had made a personal commitment to myself that one of the places that I wanted to plug in terms of my contribution to making the world a better place was really around these ideas of anti-oppression, and race and racism really spoke to me as a fundamental space where I could plug in. So when I came to my team in 2017, the thing about me is I don't separate. I'm not one of those folks who compartmentalize, like work is work and home is home, and it's all of me, all the places. So which meant as I was going on this own self-reflection of anti-racism, I was compelled to bring along everyone else in my life, whether that was my faith community, my church, or whether it was through my workplace. So we were able to, well, I will say this, my team was like, we're not quite sure we know what you're talking about or how this is going to go, but Erin, we trust you and we're willing to see where this takes us. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am that they remained open-minded. I was really nervous about how that conversation was going to go. From that point, we have just continued to build and build and build. And in 2019, we started working with an equity impact assessment process, which is really a process to consciously, intentionally think about what are the impacts of a certain policy decision, certain budget decision, certain procedural decision, different groups who might be experiencing marginalization. So as we worked with that assessment process, one of the key components of it is how are you engaged with community to have conversations with them about the impacts of whatever policy decision you're proposing. And I think this is true of many child support programs, at least was. I think more and more are changing, where we're like, oh, we don't talk to the people we serve and ask them what they think, because we know what they think and they don't like it. And so why would we go talk to them? Because we sort of had this patriarchal, we know best, right? You just do it the way we tell you and it'll be fine. And so we have created a community advisory council that has now been going since 2020 and is a really vital and important component of our decision-making process at this point. And many of the folks on that council have become really trusted colleagues over time. Continues to be, and was hard work to build those relationships with folks who have been, let's face it, sometimes harmed by our program, and build trust with that community, but it's been really helpful. The other space that we've done some investment in is around data and data collection, which is another component of using an equity impact assessment process. And for us, that meant changing our actual computer system to better collect data on race and ethnicity. We're still working on gender identity. That was also incredibly difficult because there's not really a right answer when it comes to identity, right? Like it's not like you can just, like the boxes will never change, right? You just figure out what the boxes are, put them out there and everything will be fine. That's not how those identity works. And so that's been a tricky conversation, but we can now use, and we were fortunate because we were a system that was collecting race and ethnicity data all along. It just wasn't in an ideal situation. And we had terms in our system that have, as language has evolved, become sort of offensive. So the one I always use as an example is Oriental was a choice in our system. Well, today, very few of us would ever use Oriental to refer to a person. You can refer to a road that way, but not human beings. So the way that we are now thinking about how we're using that data based on race and ethnicity and other demographic factors too, income, marital status, all of those play a role in how we think about policy decisions.
Yeah, I mean, you come from a technology and data background, so I don't think it's surprising to any of us that you're finding ways to better collect and utilize data there in your program. You and I have spoke together on different topics at conferences. I have listened on some of your topics that you've discussed, and I have a question. One of my favorite sessions that I can't believe I actually went to because I thought I didn't belong was a session that you and some powerful women in the child support program put on called Women in Leadership. Are y'all doing that again this year, or is that retiring?
That's a great question. So that session, we actually had the opportunity to do, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times in different spaces, including most recently in a space that wasn't even a child support space, but was women in government in Minnesota. And so I think that that workshop as that existed has retired, and we are now sort of brainstorming and thinking about what might come next.
I hope y'all will keep it going. Every conference I go to, one way that I like to grow is I like to pick something that on the agenda that I think, well, that doesn't apply to me. And then I go to that intentionally. And I absolutely love that session. I learned so much about each of y'all's journeys specifically, but more of, how mentors can affect people over a long period of time. And, even we had some discussions in the session that I went to around how maybe too many people look for mentors that look like them, right? There's so many, when I ask people to talk about their mentors, it's so interesting to see, usually in my experience, people talk about mentors that look like them, same gender, same race. But we talked in that workshop a little bit about how maybe expanding that would be a good idea. I have the pleasure of working with someone that I consider a mentor, which is Charles Smith, who everybody knows. I believe Charles is going to be the NCA president after you, right?
Yes, he is.
But I learned so much from that man. And I think something that does help is that we come from different backgrounds. And it's so refreshing to be curious. I think one thing you and I have talked about before is a few Ted Lasso quotes, and my favorite is be curious, not judgmental. And I think, the more we can open up our minds, even in selecting our mentors, I realize some of that comes naturally. You don't always select them. But I'm glad to hear y'all are going to continue that group workshop in some capacity, maybe have version 2.0. But I'm looking forward to hearing what y'all come up with.
Yeah, and I would just say on that idea of mentors that I think one of the ways we can find mentors that don't look like us or don't come from similar backgrounds as we do is to just ask people, right? So I'll never forget one of my very good friends now is a Black woman who used to work in the department and no longer does. And probably around 2017, I knew of her in the department. I did not know her well. And I called her up and I said, hey, I'm looking for someone to really be sort of an accountability partner for me, check my thinking. And she very graciously agreed. And it has been a life-changing relationship. So sometimes we need to sort of get over ourselves and go ask.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the final topic, final question for today. I went to Auburn. My wife went to Alabama. And for anybody who knows anything about college football, you'll get how weird that is. But Nick Saban finally retired this week. And I have a lot of respect for him, even though I can't stand that university. And in his interview yesterday that I watched, he talked about what he wanted his legacy to be. And when he answered that question, he said, I don't get to decide what my legacy is going to be, but I can tell you what I hope it is. And what he said was, I hope that people remember me as someone who positively impacted student athletes for many decades. So not just, made them better football players, but positively impacted their life in the long run. I want to ask you that same question. I realize you don't get to choose your legacy, but what would you like your legacy to be in the child support, human services world?
Well, incidentally, Coach Saban coached here at Michigan State before he went down south. So we have a soft spot in our hearts for him and a little bitterness that he left us at the same time. And I agree. I don't know that you do get to pick your legacy. Part of how I would answer that would be, it's sort of not any of my business what people think of me. Having said that, what I will say is this. I hope to be a person in the world who is compassionate, who cares, who demonstrates my faith through my relationships with others, and through my actions. And very simply, I think one of my goals in life is to love well in whatever ways that may show up in all aspects of my life. And so I hope for myself that, when I get to whatever an ending marking point may look like, if I can answer that question, have you loved as well as you can, when you can, then I will be happy.
That's beautifully put. And, there's the purpose of this podcast is to bring folks like you closer to the rest of the child support community and the government services community as a whole, to help them learn more about the people that run these agencies. And I think we did that today. I mean, I really appreciate you opening up. I really appreciate you taking the time to join GreenCourt Connections. And I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks in DC.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity, Jay.